Wow, that's a great feeling.
Really easy, right? And it's completely reusable and reliable.
Hi, I'm John Palmer, an LC column application engineer at Agilent Technologies.
And I'm Jason Link, the marketing product manager for small molecule LC columns.
I've just demonstrated how easy the new A-line Quick Connect fitting is to use in your LC or UHPLC instrument. It gives you a finger-tight, leak-proof connection that is stable to 1300 bar with a simple push of a lever.
So simple to use that everyone, even new chromatographers, will be assured of a great connection every time.
I agree. This A-line Quick Connect fitting is ideal for your column connections, where you disconnect and reconnect most often, because it's completely reusable and there's no special training necessary. Just close the lever.
But all connections aren't that simple.
No, they're not. I spend every day meeting with chromatographers, helping with method development and technical support for LC columns. One of the most common troubleshooting problems I see in the lab has to do with fittings and connections that aren't made correctly.
Why are the fittings and connections so important?
Well, Jason, ensuring proper connections has always been important, but with the increased usage of UHPLC and fast LC columns like these, improper connections can make a big impact on the chromatography.
Now, what tends to happen if a fitting isn't made correctly?
The most common issue is poor chromatography. See, here's an example of wide peaks and tailing that can occur if capillary is not seated properly at the end of the column. This occurred in the lab I visited, and they thought the issue was with the column, but after some investigation, we discovered the capillary was not seated properly. After replacing the capillary and remaking the connection, the chromatography returned to normal. The A-line Quick Connect fitting compensates for this common connection error with its unique spring-loaded design that applies a constant force to eliminate dead volume.
So John, couldn't you also have problems like leaks if fittings are not made correctly?
Yes, that's correct. It's even more of an issue as you start to use high pressures. With the UHPLC pressures, you have to take care in making sure that the ferrules and capillaries are seated properly.
That's a good point. So why don't you take us through the steps needed to make a proper fitting connection?
Here's the most common type of fitting, a swage-like fitting, used to connect capillaries to the detector, pump, or autosampler, and for other HPLC applications. The fitting nut is available in a variety of lengths, and the ferrule is made up of both a front and back piece. I'm going to walk you through the steps to make a perfect connection with this fitting. First, select a nut as long enough for the fitting you'll be using. Then slide the nut over the end of the tubing, followed by the ferrule components. Insert the capillary into the column, making sure the ferrule components do not fall off, and finger tighten the assembly while ensuring the tubing is completely seated in the bottom of the fitting. Use a wrench to gently tighten the fitting, which forces the ferrule to seat onto the tubing. Don't over tighten it though, because that will shorten the useful life of this fitting. Once you believe you have the fitting complete, loosen the nut and inspect the ferrule for the correct position on the tubing.
Thanks, John. That doesn't look so easy.
Right, it really has some skill involved. There are a couple of issues that occur fairly often. The first is when the capillary is not seated in the end of the fitting properly. This results in poor chromatography that we shown earlier. The second issue is over-tightening the fitting. Over-tightening can cause the ferrule to deform in the column and the end fitting.
When that happens, the column must be discarded, which can sometimes be an expensive consequence of over-tightening the fitting.
That's why using the A-line Quick Connect fitting is so valuable to labs.
Okay, so what about the other connections on the instrument where there isn't enough room for the Quick Connect fitting? Places like connections on the injector, detector, and other spots on the LC.
Well, I'm glad you asked. We actually have two new fittings that help ensure connections are reliable and leak-free up to 1300 bar. The first is the Agilent A-line Quick Connect fitting, which we just briefly talked about, and the second is the A-line Quick Turn fitting, which is a smaller version that's also stable to 1300 bar. The Quick Connect fitting looks like no other fitting. It has a lever on it that closes to create a perfectly sealed connection every time. All you need to do is finger tighten the fitting into the end of the column and then close the lever like this. What's great about this fitting is that it can be removed and reconnected many times and you still get the perfect leak-free connection. The second fitting, the Agilent A-line Quick Turn, can be installed with a turn of the finger for stability to 600 bar and a quick turn of the wrench for stability to 1300. We also have a special tool you can use if you don't want to use a wrench.
Let's look at a cross-cut section of a column. I think this really shows the reliability of the new fitting compared to when a standard fitting is used. With this, it's really easy to see how a standard fitting can leave a user with a gap in their column connection with the capillary.
Let's talk about the capillaries. The capillaries used with the Quick Connect fitting are proprietary to the fitting and ensure reliable connections, but they can be replaced. By simply taking a pair of pliers, you can remove the capillary and replace it with another capillary, if perhaps the current one is damaged or you need a longer one. See here the spring and additional component on the capillary?
Now, I noticed that on both of those fittings that the ferrules are not metal, but polymeric. Does that mean you can replace them?
Good eye, Jason. The ferrules on both fittings can be replaced. While you can make many connections without replacement, eventually the ferrule will wear out and need replacement. So all you have to do is take your pliers and pull the ferrule out, then just insert the new replacement ferrule and you're ready to go.
What about the quick turn fitting? Do I need special capillaries for that fitting also?
Yes, for the spring action in the fitting to work properly, you have to use the new capillary with a long socket. These capillaries have a slightly longer 1/16 inch tubing portion for the spring action to actually work.
I see. Well, here's a standard capillary compared to the capillary for the quick turn fitting. It is a bit longer, and if I put the standard capillary with a short socket in the quick turn fitting, it doesn't look like the capillary will stick out of the fitting. So I see what you mean.
And it's important to use that new capillary with the new fitting. Otherwise, you will not make the proper connection.
Now, since the socket is longer on the capillary, can I use this on all my fittings?
Yes, you can, but be aware that the socket is a bit harder than a standard capillary, so you may have to use more torque when tightening standard switch lock fittings.
Good to know. Are there any other things that need to be addressed with the new fittings?
Well, if someone is connecting the Quick Connect or Quick Turn fitting to a micro heat exchanger, you'll need to use a union since the connection from the micro heat exchanger is a capillary.
Now, what about guard columns or inline filters?
With guard columns, you should attach the guard directly to the column. You can then attach the fitting to the inlet of the guard column.
So no real issue there. What about inline filters?
It depends on where they're connected. If they are between the pump and the auto sampler, then there is not much of an issue. But if you have an inline filter after the injector, it would be necessary to use a zero dead volume union, as you did with the micro heat exchanger.
Thanks, John. I think you've done a great job demonstrating the importance of making proper connections in LC. And with the new A-line fittings, I can see how some of the issues encountered may be a thing of the past. I think they really demonstrate how a chromatographer can truly take advantage of Zorbac's RRHD and Porishell 120 columns without compromising efficiency or resolution. And with the multitude of column chemistries available in both of these column families, these fittings and columns enable a perfect method development solution in the LC laboratory.
Thanks, Jason. And thank you all for your time. I hope we've helped you make perfect fittings in your laboratory.
And for more information on these new A-line fittings, visit agilent.com/chem/A-line.